Hello and welcome back. This is episode 3 of building Kotare's Bf 109. In this episode I paint the cockpit and gear bay and finish off construction, so stick around. Alright, let's get stuck into some paint. I'll be using MRP paint throughout the painting process on this kit, mostly RLM02 and RLM66 for the gear bay and the cockpit. For an airbrush, mostly you'll be using the Iwata HPCR3 only because it's nice and quick to use, quick to clean, and it's pretty hardy. Here I am spraying the insides of the wing surfaces. So this is the upper wing that you'll see when you look up inside the gear bay, the main gear bays. No primer, just straight over the top of plastic with MRP paint. It adheres really well to the plastic and you don't need to worry about priming. A few light coats just to build up opacity, that way you don't flood the surface. Moving on to the gear bay inserts themselves, it's the same process, just light coats of MRP RLM02, several light coats to really just build up opacity and make sure we don't obscure any detail. And when you do get a coat of paint on parts like the gear bay like this, it really does show the enormous detail that Kotare have built into the model. It's the gear bays are an absolute highlight. There you go, look at the rivet detail, it's fantastic. Moving on to the cockpit side wall detail, unfortunately not quite as in focus as I would have liked, but you get that. It is amateur hour after all. Look at the detail that Kotare have put into that, it's fantastic. Moving on to the cockpit floor, again just several light coats of RLM66, which is a dark grey colour, to build up opacity of the coverage, and so as not to obscure any detail as well. Really looking forward to getting to the weathering stage on this, but one step at a time. It's all about base coating the parts at this point. This next part is the cockpit sill section. This is where the seatbelts attach, and the forward part of this is where the guns, actually the gun barrels, poke through the cowling, but I'll get to that later on. It's really an ingenious piece. And here we've got the firewall with the 30mm cannon breech that sort of sits between the pilot's legs, I guess. And then these parts, once you get a lick of paint on them, they really do, the detail on them just pops. It's quite gratifying to see. Finally we get to the instrument panel. And again, the instrument panel, it's grey plastic, but as soon as you get a drip of paint on there, you can see the immense detail that Kotare have included in it. Look at that. Looking forward to weathering that and applying decals. Like a pair of brown corduroy pants, dry brushing is back in style. Actually, were brown corduroy pants ever in style? Anyway, I'll be using some Tamiya enamel paints, German grey and flat white, to dry brush to start the weathering process by dry brushing the cockpit. So really it's very simple. We've probably all done dry brushing in the past. Just a matter of mixing up a grey you like, getting your brush all painty, and then getting rid of most of the paint on some kitchen paper or some cloth rag or something, and then just dry brushing the surface. And it really does bring out the detail on these parts. Which is a phrase I keep saying, but every step in this weathering process is basically designed to bring out detail. Cockpits on German aircraft are RLM66, which is a sort of a deep grey colour, blue-grey colour. So looking down inside a finished cockpit on a model is it's a pretty gloomy place. So I am exaggerating these effects. So you may sort of scratch your head as to what I'm doing, but here I'm really leaning into dry brushing the detail and making sure that it's quite a light colour that I am dry brushing the surface with, but I want this detail that Kotare have gone and put into the model to really sort of jump. So I'm just going to put some more white in and give it a second coat. These Tamiya enamels are fantastic for dry brushing. You could use oil paints as well. You could use Humbrol enamels if you're stuck in 1977. I choose to use Tamiya stuff because it's just awesome. And not to disparage Humbrol in any way, that seems mean. With a good dry brush, um, it really does bring out the incredible detail that are included on these parts. It's a bit hard to see in the grey plastic, and it's a bit hard to see with just a coat of grey paint. But it's once the weathering starts that really it amazes, what is included and what the Kotare have been able to build in. Such simple parts as well, one piece sidewalls, incredible detail. So just again, another coat, another mixed up colour. Doesn't need to be scientific. Just blaze away. That works for me. It does look a bit glossy in this video, but it does dry nice and matte. We get to the cockpit floor, the cockpit tub, if you like, and I get to dry brush the sidewall detail, and you can see the detail really pops for that the console or the side panel, I guess, for the pilot, and the floor either side of where the joystick goes, and where his feet will go as well. We'll be doing a lot more weathering in these parts as well later on. Now, being enamel, if you wanted to use an enamel wash or something, you'd need to seal this dry brushing in, because this Tamiya paints are enamels. The cockpit pedals are deep down in the cockpit, so I do go a little bit lighter with the dry brushing on those. It looks a bit stark at the moment, but with further weathering it'll really stand out nicely. One last coat just to be sure. A little bit brighter again. Nothing too scientific about this, I just blaze away. And the beauty of using enamels is if you go too hard or you don't like a finish, you can just use a bit of Tamiya enamel thinner to clear it off. Moving now on to the gear bays, I loved using Tamiya products everywhere I can, but in this case I'm using their dark brown panel line wash. This is a really great product for just applying a layer of grime and gunk up in there. And this is straight over the MRP paint. There's been no gloss coat or anything. MRP dries with a slight sheen, and you can see capillary action just drawing the brown wash material into and around the detail. There you go. Moving a bit closer, Sam, so you can see what's going on. This is always fun to try and apply this carefully, around the camera and around the tripod and so on your desk. So yeah, many's the time I've banged into the camera, which happens to be my phone. If only I could keep it in focus, hey? So I'm just quite liberal with the panel line wash, and then with a Q-tip and some Tamiya enamel thinners, which is the good stuff. And I use a Tamiya Q-tip as well because they're quite good quality. They don't leave dangly bits. I dab most of the thinners off and then just go around and sort of dab away any sort of unsightly tide marks or wash sort of messy looking spots. Really just want it to be like a low level patina of grime in there. These things weren't diesel, so they're not as putrid as a tank might be, but a bit of a wash around the detail really does help it pop. And it's very easy to reactivate the dried panel line wash with a Q-tip. And I just keep sort of dabbing away and dragging it across the detail to remove any excess. It's a very simple process, but deeply satisfying. I think weathering is probably my favourite part of the modelling process. As much as I do love building kits, weathering really is just the most fun for me, I think. And before long you've got a nice grubby main gear bay. And as I said earlier, I think this is probably the highlight of the kit for me, is the detail that's been included in the gear bay. And once the weathering is done, you can glue the gear bay into the lower wing section. So there's really positive detail, a positive location. There's pegs moulded into the lower wing, and there's some mounting holes in the insert. and these fit in absolutely perfectly, as you'd expect. So I'm just applying a good amount of Tamiya extra thin quick type, and then just press it down to make sure everything's in its place, and we can get to gluing in the slat bay inserts. Again, peg and hole location points just to make sure that everything is neatly in the right spot, and you can't get it wrong. The kit won't allow you to get it wrong in the wrong spot. Just a touch of extra glue just to make sure everything's adhered appropriately. Once that's in, you can actually glue the wing halves together. It's great to be finally sort of kicking off and getting a lot of this construction done, and painting some parts and gluing some painted parts in. So I'm very much adhere to the methodology of lots of glue and a big squish when gluing things like wing halves together and fuselage halves together. And to me, a quick type super thin is great for that. Capillary action really bites into the plastic, and you can squeeze out a good bead of molten plastic, let it dry for a few days, and then that's perfect for cleanup. So here I am applying more to the wingtips there and giving it a good squeeze. It's got a nice bead of molten plastic, which aids in cleaning it up later on. And there's your wings. A very simple assembly, but plenty of detail, and really it looks great. Alright, last little bit of weathering before decals. A quick wash with my absolute secret sauce, Vallejo German Camouflage Beige. This is obviously an acrylic paint. I love me some acrylic washes. So it's just some tap water, which is a bit dirty there because I've been washing brushes out in it, but that's okay. Tap water and German Camo Beige, and then just mix it up as a, really thin, super thin wash. It's probably a touch thick there. Let's add some more water. Just gloop it in, nothing scientific about it, just so that it's nice and thin, and just brush it over. Really very unscientific, and really just want a layer of sort of general grime, and this acrylic just dries beautifully into all the corners and stuff and gives a really nice layer of grime. I'll let that dry. While that's drying, I might kick off some decaling. So I'm going to use Gun's Mark Setter and Mark Softer, and I've got some Barracuda Cals decals for the instrument panel, because as you know, the kit didn't come with decals because it's a test shot. Got me a nice sticky pointy cotton bud and some tweezers. Usual routine with decals. My vessel of choice is a beer cap because it was handy, Your Honour. Yeah, so look, the Barracuda decals fit really quite nicely. I'm kind of guesstimating where everything goes. Like the middle dial is an artificial horizon climb indicator type marking. So I'm sure in the comments section people are going to be screaming that I'm putting them in the wrong spot. You know what? Please comment below. Tell me that I've got things in the wrong spot. When the Kotare kit is released, it'll have proper decals and lots more information about where they sit in the instrument panel. So skipping ahead, I applied all these individually. I used an old Hysterex punch and die set to punch out some of the really tiny decals just to make sure they fit properly. There's no film on these Barracuda Cal decals, but I wanted to make sure they were punched out of the backing paper appropriately. So detail painting. I rely on AK 3rd Gen acrylics for all my detail painting, and use a really short-handled, very tiny God hand brush, which is really terrific for getting into, around detail. Wiring inside the cockpits of these 109s was had like a aluminium or like a metallic sheath to them, so I'm using a really light grey colour. Again, I'm leaning into the brightness for the colours just so that it can be seen inside the cockpit. Lots of wiring on this side of the cockpit bay, near the fuse box. Some black for painting the sort of knobs or switches, what would you prefer? Anyway, for painting the detailing on the console on the right side of the cockpit there, and also the pilot's oxygen pipe, just in like a black or dark, very dark rubber black colour. on the throttle quadrant. Picked out some of the detail in with yellow, again using AK 3rd Gen. I'm basing this off the Canberra Bf 109 G6 or G10. You know, the color callouts will appear in the Kotare instructions, so I'm just kind of doing my best. So this is the mixture controls and throttle controls as well. And there's some sort of yellow banding on the actual throttle body itself there, the throttle quadrant body. And out with the red. These solid colours, these primary colours from AK are really terrific. They cover it in just one pass, which is kind of handy. So found it really tough to wear an optivisor and have the tripod and the camera on the desk at the same time. So apologies if it's not quite in focus. And then we get some more dry brushing. So here I am dry brushing some flat aluminium Tamiya enamel paint. And this is just to add a level of wear and sheen to the parts. Again, I really leaned into sort of being a bit brighter than I normally would because the cockpit opening is so small in the 109. I wanted the viewer, myself, whomever is looking inside the cockpit, to really see the detail. So I sort of got quite heavy with these relatively brighter colours just to highlight the detail and to really ensure that everything can be seen down inside the gloom of the cockpit. And this Tamiya enamel dry brushes really nicely. A little bit more on the brush it off on some kitchen paper, and then attack the trim wheel. And you can see on this part here where my acrylic wash has dried and left just a nice sort of grimy, dusty patina. And I appreciate that it's Europe and that it may not be super dusty. It's not meant to be Africa, but I like the look. And again, it just adds a little bit of brightness down inside the cockpit. You can go pretty hard around where the pilot's feet would sit inside their pedals and on the floor sections. Again, I'm really, I sound like a bit of a broken record, but I want it to be a bit of detail highlighted down in here so that when the viewer looks in, they can see some detail. Finally, attack the back of the pilot's seat. His uniform and the straps of the parachute that he wears would scratch the paint and so on. So it's really good to make this area nice and bright. And the flat aluminium gives a nice metallic sheen, but doesn't look like bright, ridiculous chrome silver. Very last step in weathering the cockpit, I just put a few drops of Tamiya panel line wash into some of the wiring detail, and that just helps sort of call out the beautiful detail that Mark and Richard and the team at Kotare have put into this cockpit. So the individual wiring is wild. One thing I will say though is that the wiring itself is beautifully done, and it's in scale, but it's possibly a bit too fine. And I know this has been called out on like the Spitfire, that it's a bit tricky to actually carry a wash. And I know I don't want that to sound like a criticism because it really isn't. It's just something I've observed. It's just that the detail is so fine, it's quite tricky for it to carry a wash. So these could be 50% bigger or 25% bigger, this wiring. It would carry a wash better. It might not be accurate, but from a modeller's perspective, it might be a bit easier to paint. But, it sounds like a criticism. It really isn't. And I just give the wiring a quick wipe off with a Q-tip, a very fine Q-tip dipped in enamel thinners, just to take away some of the wash. And this really just helps, I guess, accentuate and delineate individual wiring strands. So now we get to the fun bit, gluing it all together. So I've really been sort of looking forward to getting this to this point once we've got the weathering done. And the construction is super simple. Again, as I keep sort of saying, without sounding too much like a broken record, the kit doesn't allow you to make any mistakes, and that's a real conscious design decision that the team have lent into. You get to watch me fumble around trying to, sausage finger the parts together. That's always good fun, isn't it? Keep in mind that I am working around a tripod and a camera, so, and I'm new here. But the parts fit together amazingly well, and you can see the detail that they've, under a coat of paint looks pretty great, I reckon. And so they slot together really nicely, very positively. And you can see the big locating tabs with holes in them, and this will be evident when I glue the cockpit into the fuselage halves. It's a very positive location. So yeah, plenty of glue. You don't want it falling apart. You don't want anything rattling around. You note that I haven't placed the seat base with the seat belts and also the joystick in there. I'll be placing these in last, after the model is completed. Next on is the cockpit sill, and very accurately the seat base overlaps the cockpit sill edge there, which it's meant to do. And I'm just popping the sides into place. A bit of glue, and away we go. This is a very clever piece of engineering, this. The sill itself obviously tops off the cockpit, which is really nice. And those troughs on the other end, they house the machine guns for the cowling. Now I get to glue in the rear gear bay, if you like, for the tail wheel, for the tall tail wheel. This slots in perfectly. A couple of dabs of glue, and away we go. Fits perfectly, as you'd expect. This next part of the fuselage assembly is for if you want to represent a segment of 109G fuselage. A lot of, or some number of K fuselages had actually G components in them, and you can see one here. There's it's a K aircraft, but it's got I guess one of the sections are from a G. Whether it was a new build or a repair or something like that, and you can see that panel missing. So it's quite cleverly done. You just drill out the part and glue the section in that Kotare provides you, if you want to do that option. It is called out in the instructions. You can add it there if you like. And now we can put the cockpit into the fuselage halves. Those large tabs that I talked about earlier really help positively locate the cockpit tub into the fuselage halves. Bit of glue in there, and you can see the machine gun bay in the nose cowling there. So, bit of glue, chuck it in, a lot of glue maybe, can't hurt. Here, just making sure that there's a nice positive fit. It clicks together so well, you can't get it wrong. Just making sure there's a very hairline seam here where the cowling, the cockpit sill meets the fuselage sides. It's a perfect fit though, so just a bit of quick squeeze and it's in. And you can see the troughs where the machine guns go. Now just putting in the spinner mount prop shaft thing. What I like to do on my 109 models as well is just remove a tiny bevel at the seam where the fuselage halves go together. They were constructed in left and right halves. Now Kotare haven't done this. They've actually got the fuselage halves to meet completely perfectly, which is no mean feat. But I prefer to have just a tiny, I guess, a tiny visible panel line in my fuselage halves. So they don't call it out in the instructions. It's just something I personally like to do. So I just give it a quick scrape with a knife blade, and that way when it's glued together you do get a nice seam line that you can run a dark wash through. And this did exist on the real 109, and here's the Canberra 109G6, and you can see the seam at the bottom. Now we can glue on the other fuselage side. Just a quick run of Tamiya quick type. Just not too much because you don't want to obscure that beautiful piano hinge detail on the top of the cowling. Again, you can see the machine gun bay troughs prominent there. And then just running a small bead of glue into that seam that I created in the bottom. Now I was very careful in creating that seam. and along the top as well, just so that it does match the rest of the panel lines. So look, in reality it's tiny, and it's possibly even a little bit of panel overlap where the panels were riveted together, the left and right panels, but I choose to replicate it as a seam. Here is the panel forward of the cockpit. This covers what would effectively be the breech area for the cowling guns. This panel itself doesn't fit super perfectly, and that's very intentional. These things were built by humans, and as Kotare refers to it, as perfectly imperfect. So there's meant to be some slight mismatch of panels here. And these are the panels behind the cockpit opening. You get one for closed and one for open canopies, or vice versa there. The one with the ridge is for closed canopy, so it fits perfectly. Moving on to the lower cowling. Just a bit of care is taken here. This is the part that Mark is in the process of rejigging to have it fit perfectly. I found that it actually fit quite well. I gave the mating surfaces a very quick sand just to ensure that there was no extra plastic or anything, which there really wasn't. A bit of glue and a bit of gentle persuasion, and it actually fits really nicely. Again, leaning into that perfectly imperfect. And now I can glue the wing assembly onto the fuselage. The fit here is snap tight. You know, not to pinch the old snap tight kits catchphrase there, but yeah, it really does fit perfectly well. Quick run of glue, and you can see I've got some tape holding the fuselage halves together just to ensure that they stay aligned while the glue dries. Out with the old Tamiya extra thin quick type, which responds really nicely with the plastic in this kit. And you can see there the leading edge where it fits in behind the cowling. Just a little bit of a push to get everything rightly aligned, because the quick type glue does work very quickly, so you want to make sure everything's in place when you apply the glue. And the tail surfaces and horizontal stabilizers snap together quite well. A little bit of glue. Unlike the Spitfire, these are moulded in a not posed position, so they're dead straight. I chose to just deflect them down a little bit to add just a little bit of interest, I guess. And we'll mount it to the tail. It's a click fit, you know, it really does positively snap together or click together. Stop saying snap, Sam. You can't get these misaligned. It's really quite clever. Just give it a quick squeeze to ensure that it's all perfectly aligned. And here's the wooden tail. This locks in really nicely as well. There's a slight gap there, a slight seam, but I'll attend to that later. You can see I've just deflected the horizontal control surfaces on the rear there down a little bit. And here is the late pattern tail. You can mix and match with late and early tails. These things really were, you know, put together with whatever was available, which, you know, is a bit of a cliche, but it is true. Once you start looking at photos, you find a mix of early and late tails on these aircraft, but it does look great. And now we can add the control surfaces on the main wings. The main wings, is that the right term? Anyway, quick bit of glue. You can see there's a slot there for the mass balancers. I'll add those in really late after I paint the model, just so that I don't break them off. And the flaps, it's pretty self-explanatory. Just a bit of glue, not too much to flood the detail, just enough to hold the part in. And finally, I've touched up some areas with Mr. Surfacer. So I use Mr. Surfacer 500 and just brush it on. Just a few areas just to make sure everything is really, you know, no gaps and no seams at all. You can still mismatch panels, but just to make sure it's nice and neat. And then I use AK real colour thinners and a cotton swab, and then just, I think the term I've seen used online is chemical sanding, which sounds a bit of a wank, but it's what it is. It's basically just removing the excess putty. It doesn't damage the surface of the plastic at all. It just ensures a perfect, no gap seam line, if you like. It's a really handy, useful process, and I use it on all my models actually, because I don't like the look of models with lots of putty on them, so I always use Mr. Surfacer like this, and cotton swab and either isopropyl alcohol or AK thinners, and it's a great way of cleaning up your model and making it look super neat for photos, or for video in this case. And a quick buff, and look at that, super neat. And the slight gap in the tail I mentioned earlier, again, I just Mr. Surfacer and a cotton swab, and there you go, perfectly aligned. And here's the supercharger intake. So I just put a bit of extra putty on the inside just to hide the seam that's in there. You can see that the outside does have a very satisfying weld on it, because it was a welded part. And a bit of glue, and we're in. Moving to the cockpit again, this is the Revy gun sight, which is a very pleasing, neat little part. I've masked it off, so it's a bit blurry here. Masked the glass sections off, painted it in a semi-gloss black colour, and then we can mount it into the cockpit bay. So here I'm just a bit of glue and squeezing it in. There you go. And this piece here is called out in the instructions as an infrared screen or something, so I'm not entirely sure what this is. I've never seen it before, so I have to wait for the completed instructions to know exactly what it is. But anyway, I masked it off with some cement tape and gave it a quick squirt with RLM 66, and it goes just above the instrument panel in the cockpit and sits just inside the forward glass. So I've used Tamiya orange cap glue there because it's a little bit slower working, and you can see there's little slots in just above the instrument panel, and it just slots straight in. And of course Mr. Sausage Fingers here pushes it a little bit too far forward, so when I go to mount the canopy glass, I need to move it. See, oops, so that's fine. Luckily that glue is relatively slow drying, so I can just move it backwards a touch, and then apply the canopy. The fit here of the canopy glass is perfect, as you would imagine. A bit of extra Mr. Surfacer, just to ensure again that fits perfectly, and I'll clean that Mr. Surfacer up before we move on to paint. So that about wraps it up for episode 3. Coming up in the final instalment, I finally get some paint on the outside of this model. I apply markings using masks and decals, and of course get to the fun bit, weathering. Thanks for watching this far. Please don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you get notified of new content. Thanks for watching.